COVID-19, how Wuhan was the test city for 5G. I talked about Harold Shipman. I talked about vaccines. I talked about fluoride. And that was that. So I ceremoniously got thrown off there, but I got a job then as a health and nurse on Sons of Liberty Radio. Now I work for Unity News Network, my own show. And just yesterday, TNT have offered me a show, my own show. So it's going great so far. Now, because I had done that video, people started contacting me. They started to tell me about their loved ones being, I'm going to use the word, assassinated, murdered in the hospitals and the care homes. And then the nurses themselves started to contact me and send me videos. Look, we're empty. And then doctors, I even had a doctor contact me about an elderly lady, never been in hospital in her 90s, was sitting up eating her dinner when he went home. When he came back the next day, dead, COVID-19. So I ended up emceeing the rallies. I'm sure you all saw that. I've been chased down Whitehall in my high heels. 3.2 million views on Whitehall. On YouTube of me being chased down Whitehall. It's very easy to spot. I'm the only woman that wears a cape. And then I got arrested. I've been charged. I've got criminal charges against my name. They gave me 3 fines, 600, 600, 600. I could pay £66 a month. Court cost of 180, that's 3 sixters. And recently someone came to my door to tell me there was a warrant out for my arrest because I was a little bit late paying 66 quid. Anyway, he didn't have a warrant, he was lying. But all of this has gone on, and once you're sort of out there, you may as well just carry on. You know, I started, so I'll finish. So I got my registration, they said they struck me off. I actually resigned, and I served them notice of genocide. But what's actually happening now, and I kept going, and it's very simple. It's really simple, and I'm just going to put it in a nutshell for you. The pharmaceutical companies were going bust. They'd spent the pensions. So what they've actually done is they've dropped your expected lifespan. They've increased the age at which you can retire and claim your state pension, but they haven't dropped the contributions that were on you living much longer. So by doing that, if you're dying earlier but still paying a lot of money, and they're going to make sure you don't live longer, which is what I'm going to talk about next, they're now making a lot of money. It's cash for corpses. So that's exactly what's happening. And what they used, and we've all seen Matt Hancock, Andrew Sabinski was in the background. You didn't see him on that news footage. When Matt Hancock was asked, what is a good death? I can tell you what a good death is, because I'm sure the Sikhs will tell us, but we forget about that as white Brits, because we throw our elderly into nursing homes, and we don't want to see it. We're uncomfortable with death. And yet I can guarantee you we're all going to get there. If we're lucky, we'll get there later than others. But what they do is they ordered 9.9 million milligrams of midazolam, which is a benzodiazepine. It suppresses the respiratory centre in your brain. It acts on that central nervous system. And they used all of that up within several months. And what did they do? If a person weighs 50 kilograms, so the dosage for midazolam is 0.1 milligram per kilogram of weight, 2.2 pounds to the kilogram. So if you weigh 50 kilos, you're going to get 5 milligrams over an hour. Now, that has to be watched, and you have to have the antidote. That's what they use in anaesthesia if you go for an operation. This is what an anaesthetist said, a top anaesthetist in Australia. When you put morphine with that, you increase the potency of the midazolam. It makes it even more potent. And all bets are off. This is his words. All bets are off. You now have a very unstable patient. I worked in theatres. If you go up to 0.2 milligrams of midazolam, that in itself can cause that patient to respiratory arrest. So they then gave morphine with it, and they gave remdesivir. And remdesivir, the carrier agent for that, accumulates in your kidneys. So we're talking about not fit and healthy people like most of us here. We're talking about elderly who had lots of other illnesses. They were on a whole carry bag of drugs. Whenever any elderly go into hospital, they've always got a big carry bag of all these drugs. And a lot of them were really thin. And they put them on all these drugs, and John Looney said that he always knew when the patients had had remdesivir because the body bags were full of fluid. And I have some notes at home of a patient who died, and I was so horrified at the amount of drugs he was given. I was incredibly shocked. And the one thing at his autopsy report that shocked me the most was he had all 32 of his adult teeth. So one could state from that fact that he was in great health. He was on no drugs and he had all his own teeth. Your teeth are 2.5 times stronger than your bones. If you die with all your teeth in your mouth, you're in great shape. But that man died of kidney failure, heart failure, sepsis, he had jaundice, he had pitting edema where he was full of fluid. It was horrific, absolutely horrific. He had shingles, herpes, and he was on a great big list of drugs. They literally culled him. He went to the hospital a bit short of breath. He walked in there. On the day that they put a ventilating tube down his throat, he'd had crunchy nut cornflakes for his breakfast with almond milk and a lentil curry. So one could state that he wasn't breathless, because anybody in here, there's another gentleman who's a nurse, will tell you, if you're breathless, you can't eat, can you? It takes so much effort to breathe, you haven't got time to eat all that nosh. And he phoned his wife on the mobile, he negotiated his way around an iPhone, on FaceTime, so his brain was adequately perfused with oxygen. They're going to put a tube down my throat so that I can breathe, so that I won't die. That was the last time she spoke to him, and he died in there. So this is what happened. So the 90,000 patients that were shipped out of the hospitals, they were all sent out of there into the care homes, and one could say, well, why did the care homes take them if they'd got COVID-19, if you believe it exists? Well, they took them because the government paid the care homes £3,300 extra on top of the fee per week, plus a one-off payment to take each one of those patients. So it was very lucrative. And they got 90,000 more coming on that train, hadn't they, to go in there. 83% of the elderly that went into those, I'd like to say facilities for caring, 83% of them that went in, that died, all received midazolam. Texas, 84% in America received midazolam. There's a case in America that I'm following of a 19-year-old girl who had huge doses of lorazepam and morphine. This was all order, cash for corpses, and it all goes round. So what's actually going on now? We have the Anglo-Indian Alliance that Gukram was talking about, the Anglo-Indian Alliance. So you've got all these main Indian people, rich people in government. I didn't vote Rishi Sunak in, did you? No, we didn't vote him in. And what you've got is 50% of the global drugs market comes from India. And they've said that they're going to double it in the next few years. So that would mean 100%. 75% of the factories, and they are factories that are making the pharmaceutical drugs in India, do not even meet the World Health Organization standards. So we recently had a third of the paracetamol on the global market was contaminated, and it killed loads of children in a cough tincture. Liz Truss opened up trade with India to allow the drugs in, and nobody took that paracetamol off the market, even though it was found to be in Atlantis Pharmaceuticals in Georgia. We have 2 Atlantis Pharmaceuticals here. They didn't put any report out on the news about that it had killed children. And Charlie, the guy who was filming for me, he did a natural nurse report as an emergency, and we put that out everywhere. If you think that the nurses are going to spot that it's the contaminated paracetamol, you're giving them far too much credit, I can assure you. Because if they really were that educated, would they be giving morphine and midazolam in such huge doses to patients? No. So this is what you've got coming, and you're going to have India owning all of that drugs market. The Tory government did away with our patient safety agency to protect us from contaminated drugs in, I think it was 2014. So we don't have anybody looking out for us. So you've got all these dirty drugs coming in. You've got the Anglo-Indian Alliance. Is anyone really looking out for you? No. So let's go back to the morphine and midazolam. So those nurses, in order for someone to be put on NG31 guideline in the NHS, NG31, that's an end-of-life care pathway. I don't know where they get the care bit from, but end-of-life pathway. You have to have a terminal diagnosis to be put on that, NG31. Now, we have a lady, her name will come to me in a minute, but she said that we worked, she was advocating the use of the Liverpool care pathway, and it was ordered that it had to be stopped. So she said it would be phased out. And it wasn't phased out, and what's interesting is that lady's husband also lectures at Chase Business School, I think it is in London, and it's all on the pensions. Rain, what's her name? June. Is it June? She's a baroness, and she's also a rabbi. It'll come to me in a minute. So she's supposed to have got away with the Liverpool care pathway, done away with it, but we've been lied to because we've had a whole decade of more killing. And I can tell you, this is nothing new. This is nothing new what happens. It's just that the mask is off because they're killing in such big numbers. So NG163, what was that? NG163 was where they administered morphine and midazolam, and it states on the bottom, don't concern yourself basically if it affects the patient's breathing. Don't worry about that. So the patient arrives with difficulty breathing. Are you going to give them a drug that's going to make their breathing even worse? No, you're not. But that's what they did. On the 29th of April 2020, doctors were given authority to remove all essential medication and food and water from a patient, and they could then be put on this end of life, or this NG163. Nobody got out of NG163. You went out of there in a zip-up bag with a couple of tags on. Now, if that patient is on a NORAC drug, which is an anti-clotting drug, that could be catastrophic. They're going to throw off clots if you just remove that drug straight away. What if that's a patient that's got dementia and they've been on lorazepam for years, or even over 9 months? As soon as you withdraw that drug, one of the side effects of withdrawing it is inner chaos. Now you've got inner chaos, what are they going to give them? Well, they'll just give them diazepam or midazolam. If you're giving midazolam, you have to have the antidote for an azanil. You have to have it. They didn't have that. A Supreme Court in America in 2018 stated you cannot use midazolam on prisoners on death row because it was, quote, akin to waterboarding, and it was prolonged torture, but they'll quite happily give it to your loved ones. When you remove water from somebody, it's horrific. If you go and read up, and it's on my Telegram page, about when you dehydrate someone to death. I was sent a photograph of a Down syndrome lady who died on that protocol, and her tongue was black and out of her mouth. So that midazolam that they're not to give to prisoners on death row, and Pfizer aren't allowed to provide it for death row, but they're quite happy to give it to your loved ones. They gave 5 to 7 times the dose. 5 to 7 times the dose to those patients. They didn't check the respirations or the blood pressure or the oxygen saturation level. A lot of it was done in the care homes. All of those things begin to go down when you give the two together. Remember, you have a very unstable patient. So if NG31 is an end-of-life care pathway, and you have to have a terminal diagnosis in order to put someone on it, it states on their guideline, NG31, you have to take into consideration the patient's hydration, so you have to keep them hydrated, you have to take into consideration their nutritional needs, and you cannot hasten a death. Euthanasia is illegal in this country, and also euthanasia has to have consent anyway. Anne Winterton was pivotal in the anti-euthanasia bill. That remains to this day. It's illegal for having euthanasia. Now, my MP, Naz Ghani's just voted for assisted dying. Canada has just stated that they're actually euthanizing 3% of their population, and they've included prolonged grief, ADHD, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, autism, they're all on that list of what can be a depression. And 3% of their population have been euthanized. And we are supposed to be, as Great Britain, the trailblazers. So NG31, you've got to have a diagnosis. So why were so-called COVID patients put on NG163 and given these drugs and had all their food, water and essential medication removed if they were planning on saving them? They weren't planning on saving them. Not with 9.9 million milligrams of midazolam, they weren't saving anybody. So this is what happened. That's your wave, your first waves. All the deaths were in the care homes. Now, Jeremy Hunt was pivotal in a document called Exercise Sickness, and it wasn't supposed to be shown to the public because they said it would be too scary. But they mentioned it in the House of Lords. It had to go in the library. So then Stuart Wilkie downloaded it quickly, and we've got it. And we've sent it everywhere. And they talk about reverse triage, and basically sacrificing the elderly and the disabled. Isn't that a sign of a civilised society when we look after them? And then we have another document which you should all go and look at. It's called the Palliative Care Funding Review of 2011. And if you go onto page 64, you'll see a box. And it gives you all the ages by demographics and how many are going to die in 2011. And then it goes right up to 2031. Now you'd think, because all the doctors have just gone into the care homes, because they're all privately owned, the doctors' surgeries, and they've just given all the elderly flu shot, COVID booster, shingle shot, pneumonia shot, you'd sort of think, wouldn't you, that they're trying to save the elderly's lives? Well, they're clearly not, because the death rate up to 2031 from 2011 rises exponentially, and above that box it states that they are going to be expanding those that they've put onto palliative care, and they're going to be incentivising it. That's cash for corpses. That means more people are going to be put on it, and they're going to be getting a lot more money for doing it. Jeremy Hunt said, oh, we can't tax the rich, so we'll tax the elderly. So what they're doing now, you go into hospital, you get sick, and your loved ones say, well, we'll look after them at home. No. They know you've got a house, they can slap a doll on you. That stops you from leaving. And then what they do is they decide that they can then draw down from your estate to the last 100 grand, and then they ship you out to a nursing home. 93% of the nursing homes in the UK are owned by two companies, both with their accounts in the Cayman Islands. And you'll get shipped to one of them, and they're now buying up more nursing homes. One is HC1. I think it's a rich Arab billionaire. So you go out to that, and then when you die, if you go and stay in a hotel, I don't think any of us can afford to stay in a hotel anymore. But if you stay in a hotel, when you check out, that's your bill ended, isn't it? When you're in a nursing home, your bill continues till there's somebody else in that bed. So if you die, they keep charging from your last 100 grand till the bed is filled. So it's great, very lucrative, isn't it, to own a nursing home? It's interesting because you don't see many Asians, you don't see very many, you generally just see the Westerners in there. So there's something to learn from that. So the NHS 21-22 mandate, I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and it was signed by Matt, not Matt Hancock Matt, because he's your friend. And it stated we were going to have 40 new hospitals. I can't find them. Does anyone know of a new hospital in their area? No. They've extended the hospitals with single rooms, but they haven't extended the kitchens. So I wonder if you're actually going to get fed, or whether you're just going to get put in the room for your NG, well, it's not even NG163 anymore, it's now 27 something. So they haven't done that. They said they're getting overseas nurses. They're going to be bringing in all the latest technology. It's going to be AI. So you're now looking at not allopathic medicine, which is really